Greetings and welcome to In Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. I came here as a foreigner, an autistic, a penguin on dry land. But the good Lord always has my back, the single set of footprints in the sand. Words from Band of Brothers representing Rowan McEwan's journey through Queen's Royal College. Rowan and his mother, Deborah, join us now to share more. Welcome, Rowan. Welcome, Deborah. And Rowan, I want to start off with you, please. Why QRC? Is that the school? Is that the school that you wanted to go to?
Well, QRC was really my second choice. When I was doing SE, I didn't really think all that much of it. I didn't really think all that much of any of my school choices, really. I kind of just wanted to go to Fatima to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather and uncle. But I digress. After a few years at QRC, I realized that it really is, the place for me.
And thank you so much. No, I think you'll be hurting a lot of people hard because a lot of people have QRC as their first choice. But we won't jump down that rabbit hole too much. But Mommy Deborah, hearing that, were you nervous about it in terms of saying, okay, well, these are the schools that Rowan wants to go to? What were your thoughts when you got this information?
To be honest, we didn't quite know what school would accept Rowan, and certainly when he was about to do SCA, because there were many primary schools when we came back from abroad. There were many primary schools that didn't accept Rowan at all, and he was actually doing SCA from a special school of just 7 kids. Again, but I digress. But in assessing schools, the onus was on me as a parent to go into the school and go up front and say, this is a future student, a possible future student, and what accommodations would you be able to give for him, and I can help educate in terms of what accommodations you may need, and also to alleviate fears, because a lot of autism is surrounded in stigma and miseducation. So the onus was on me to step out there and to try to educate to broach conversation with the principal at first, and then to hear what was the reception. But before that could happen, his tutor at the time told me that he didn't belong in secondary school, that he wouldn't last a day in secondary school, and that I should go to Ishi's. So I did. His aide and I went, and the principal of Ishi said, this young man sounds like he will do well at secondary school, and I really think you should meet with the principals of these secondary schools, and I actually would recommend that you go to QRC and talk to the principal. And I'd known Mrs. Simon. We went to university together, but that had nothing to do with this. I was actually even more apprehensive, I think, because of that. But when I said to him, I said that my son was autistic, he looked at me and he was like, okay, yes. And it was like, what's the point? I mean, and then he backed it up by saying, if this is the school that he passes for, this is where he belongs. And that has never changed. I mean, I wrote that in my poem. That never changed.
And I really appreciate that in terms of saying, if the fruit of your labor, Rowan, is to pass for QRC, we will not deny you that opportunity. But I want to ask though, Rowan, your mom just alluded to being in school outside of Trinidad and Tobago, then going to a special school here. What sort of differences did you experience at schools before QRC and then during QRC?
Okay, so during my early grade school years, I was my family was a bit, well, nomadic. We we moved around a lot because of my father's job. We ended up getting posted to a lot of different locations. So I remember in I think in kindergarten and also first grade I was in uh India, and for in third grade I was in Libya. In fourth grade I went over to the UK, and then I came back to Trinidad for for standard five to finish up my primary school journey. So yeah, there was a lot of moving happening.
I think he doesn't remember too much in terms of the early years, but we've actually been really blessed, I have
Yeah.
to say, because in the beginning, although in the beginning I was the one who had to, I spent for a month, I spent a few hours in school every day, just sitting waiting, just in case something happened, because they didn't know quite what to expect. And then there were times when they would. There was one time in particular when he wasn't getting a topic. It was math, and math is always a challenge. And they were teaching money, and money is literal for an autistic. And he just wasn't getting it. So they asked me to take him home, and I sat in the library that afternoon. I taught him in a different way. And by the time the extracurricular activity was done, which he was supposed to be at, but which he said, take him home, he had done the entire paper that they had to do in class. He'd done all correct. And the teacher was really shocked. So they realized from those instances that they needed to teach him a little bit differently. And there were things that there were instances where he surprised them in terms of, for instance, in Hindi, he was actually the top student in the class. Mm-hmm. So it was a learning experience by all the way. I think, interestingly enough, every single country we've been to, he has been rejected from at least one school. In India, it was actually the American school. In Libya, it was actually the British school. And in England, quite a few British schools. And then the school that he was at actually had indicated that they would no longer be able to teach him. So, we talk about how Trinidad is and all the time and pull it down, but it's worldwide. What's happening is worldwide. It's not just in Trinidad and Tobago. And the key is education. The key is educating all the parties that are involved.
And we want to go to that key of education when we return, but we'll nice up the second half. We're speaking with Rowan McEwan as well as Dr. Deborah Bartholomew, and we return to this conversation in just a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are going in depth on the journey through QRC with Rowan McEwan and his mother, Dr. Deborah Bartholomew. And Rowan, it seems as though you're involved in many, many things. I saw you playing the trombone. You were a school prefect. I think one time I saw a story about you being able to read kanji. The process of doing all of those things, does involving yourself in those things make schoolwork easier, or is it? So how do you work out doing all of these things and still saying, okay, well, this is my work, I need to cover it as well?
Okay, so well, involving myself in all these things, I wouldn't necessarily say it would make my schoolwork easier. I definitely don't do it with the end goal of doing so. It might actually make some things easier for me, but a lot of a lot of things I have I usually pick up as hobbies. So autistic people usually have these things called special interests. So it's just something that they have an interest in. Like one of my special interests is language, especially language that use scripts outside of English. And why I've been to, I've run into quite a few.
And one of the things I think about that, and I really appreciate what you're saying, and in terms of saying one of your special interests is language, and I take the experience of your mom saying that you were top of the class in Hindi, and Hindi is very specific, which I think I get from you from time to time in this conversation, Rowan. So in terms of being able to talk about your grandparents on your mother's side versus your grandparents on your father's side, and having that level of specificity, but also with regard to special interests. It reminds me of Albert Einstein saying that play is the highest form of research. I think that also kind of ties in there. But speaking of research, have you found ways that, Rowan, that you say, okay, well, I learn better doing it this way? And have you been able to share some of those ways with people around you?
Well, yes, I have. I won't go into too much detail about it, but um, see, in sixth form, I was struggling with sociology. Sociology features a lot of essay writing, and even though it's a science, it's not very, you know, it's not very cut and dry. You know, it's there's a lot of little nuances and things to it, and it's not very concrete. So I had a hard time getting the knowledge in, not only getting the knowledge into my head, but also applying my knowledge into a situation or an essay. So one of the ideas my mom had was to um represent the facets of sociology. So whatever material I was reading at the time, she decided it would be easier if we represented it visually using pictographs and whatever.
Well, autistics learn. Well, over the years I realized that they appreciate visual information better. So even everything, every single thing, like a routine that you want to put up on the wall of a school, or present any information to them, it's better that you present it visually. Even textbooks, not text, yeah, textbooks, notebooks, they all look the same. And I once sat down and saw him struggle to pack his bag, even though the bag the books had all were labeled. He could not. I don't know if it was the nerves, the anxiety that went with getting ready for the next day, but he just couldn't pack his bag. And so I sat down and thought about it, and I thought maybe the issues that autistics had with reading faces also extended to, because he couldn't read faces if they were all in the same uniform in the beginning, in the early days. So I thought maybe that kind of blindness extended to his books as well, especially if they were covered. So what I did was I sat down and every single book, especially the notebooks, I did a drawing on each one. I'm really artistic, so I sat down and I did, for instance, French. I did the Eiffel Tower. Spanish, I did a matador. you know, and the difference, the marked difference. I mean, he was able to pack his bag in minutes, as opposed to taking almost an hour to pack his bag before. So everything after that, I started trying as much as possible. Anytime he struggled, to give him a visual instead of trying to explain it in words, because we know that autistics have issues with verbal processing of language. So it's way easier. It's almost as if that's the language that he speaks. Pictures, yeah.
It is extremely easier than having to read the walls of text you'd find in a textbook.
And that kind of reminds me of some of the pushback that individuals would have levied towards Google when I think they made all the icons the same color, around the same size in that suite of applications. But we have about 2.5 minutes. I want to ask, what else has Rowan taught you specifically? Because you have insider knowledge now, Dr. Bartholomew, and inside that time, also, what is next for you, Rowan? So I don't know who wants to go first. Let's ask, what's next for you, Rowan?
Well, okay, so I have graduated from secondary school. So I decided to take a gap year, and during that I'm going to use that time to, you know, hone my skills and find my true hobbies and things like that.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Dr. Bartholomew, what are some of those things that you really want to share in terms of being an advocate, being a mother, and also anything else you want to share with us at this point in time?
Gosh, when I first started, I was really ridiculed and told that I was in denial and that kind of thing. And the Temple Grandin movie changed my life, because there it is that someone is talking about her mother and how much her mother taught her and stood in the breach for her. And she was able to explain to people what it was like to be autistic. But for me, what I learned was that it wasn't that Rowan was different and less. It's that Rowan is just different. And in fact, maybe even different and more different and better, because there are things that Rowan can see and can appreciate that I never will be able to. And he's taught me to use all my gifts to be able to try to make the world a better place, and that's what matters. So because of Rowan, I started trying to provide internships or link up young men at QRC with internship opportunities, because someone actually, a young man actually reached out to Rowan and you know, tried to calm him after an exam. And so I offered him a place working at my office, just interning, just observing, and I'm mentoring him. And it made a huge difference in his life. And someone intended that for Rowan.
And we want to thank you for sharing the gift of your time and experience with us, Dr. Deborah Bartholomew, as well as you, Rowan McEwan, and all love, light, strength, powers, grace, and beauty on your continued journey. And on behalf of the entire team at TTT, I'm Dike Rostant. This has been In Depth. Thank you for joining us.